Very important hearing. In the IT sector, it is absolutely critical that we secure our data. We have seen the data breaches of huge proportions in the private sector. We've seen them at the White House, the Department of State, Internal Revenue Service, and certainly the Office of Personnel Management. Like these agencies, the Department of Education is a prime target. It houses the personal information of more than 139 million Americans. The data breach at the Office of Personnel Management was something like 22 million, but there are 139 million Americans that would be affected by a data breach at the Department of Education. We also need to remember that the Department of Education also oversees a student loan portfolio of more than $1.2 trillion. This puts it on the proportion of Citibank and other major financial institutions. It is critical because taxpayers deserve the best in our Chief Information Officer, and they're not getting the best at the Department of Education. The Inspector General testified recently that the Department continues to be vulnerable to security threats and has repeatedly failed to implement their recommendations and failed to detect friendly hacks into their system. The Department scored a negative, it was one of just a handful of agencies, but a negative 14% on the Office of Management Budget's Cyber Sprint. Cyber Sprint was intended to get government-wide, get them up to speed, put more security in place, and yet the Department of Education was one of a handful of agencies that actually scored negative on that. And they received an F in the FITARA scorecard. This is a self-reported score, and they scored an F. Mr. Harris has served as the Chief Information Officer since 2008, and by virtually every metric, he's failing to adequately secure the Department's systems. The committee's concerns were further amplified after learning Mr. Harris was investigated for possible criminal and administrative misconduct. The IG closed its investigation a few months ago, finding that the CIO potentially broke 12 federal laws, regulations, and/or agency directives. But the Department of Justice refused to prosecute. That is a mystery to us. We don't understand why they would not prosecute such wide use and abuse of the system. Mr. Harris was running 2 side businesses he intentionally failed to disclose on federally required ethics forms, a home theater installation business, a car detailing business, and inappropriately used agency resources and most likely agency time. Mr. Harris also admitted to the Inspector General he did not report the income to the Internal Revenue Service. Now, most Americans would get in trouble for this type of situation and basically hiding information from the IRS. Additionally, the Inspector General raised serious allegations that Mr. Harris influenced government contract. As a high-ranking public official, Mr. Harris played a role in awarding and oversighting contracts to a close friend's company. Equally disconcerting are the anonymous tips that the Inspector General described Mr. Harris' leadership as intimidating. This investigation started because people within the Department of Education expressed concern as whistleblowers. And the morale in the office of the CIO is an all-time low due to a dysfunctional environment that Mr. Harris has cultivated. Let me put up the chart. There we go. We rely heavily on a disinterested third party to come in and evaluate. These are 14 metrics in the office of the CIO at the Department of Education. Every single score is going down. Every single one of those is negative. And the Office of the Chief Information Officer at the Department of Education scored 285 out of 320, near the very bottom of his class. You can take that chart down. Look at the turnover rate for the IT staff within the Department of Education. Fiscal year, it was 5%. Turnover rate in fiscal 2014 was 6%. Turnover rate in 2015 was 10%. It's a key metric and an understanding that maybe things aren't very good in that department. Every key metric is down. They're scoring an F on their scorecard. You got an IG who's making a recommendation for criminal prosecution, the Department of Justice, and what does the Department of Education do? They give him bonuses. More than $200,000 in bonuses, Mr. Harris got over the last 10 years. And I want to know why. We got good, quality people working at the Department of Education, and we got something wrong going on in that department, and we're bonusing them up? That makes absolutely no sense. Mr. Harris came and testified before this committee in November. I asked him a basic question about IT. Are you using COBOL? COBOL was instituted in the 1960s. The answer was no, we're not using that. Ends up they have more than 1 million lines of code in the central processing system, also in the National Student Loan Database. So he's off with these other businesses, getting subordinates to do the work, taking bonuses, has 3 other jobs, and we're giving him bonuses. Every single metric is going down. Scoring an F on the scorecard, there's vulnerability, and there's 139 million people who are at risk. We don't have time to play these kind of games. This is exactly what the Oversight and Government Reform Committee is all about. Mr. Harris has had roles at the adjunct professor at Howard University. He's consulting for the Detroit Public Schools. He's in IT consulting services for the city of Detroit. Congratulations. You don't have time to do that stuff. Simply put, when the CIOs fail to bring high management and ethical standards to their work, institutions suffer, systems are weakened, and the data of millions of Americans are endangered. For all the wrongdoing here, I'm telling you, there are a lot of good people who rely on the Department of Education. They work there. There are people at home in every state and every corner of our country who rely on this. But you know what? There are 10 senior officials at the Department of Education under investigation right now. Mr. Harris is one of them. Bob Shireman's another one. Who are the other ones? Because this is an agency that has to function. If we're going to pour the billions of dollars in it, they got to deal with it ethically. But we're looking at a situation here that's not going well. And that's why we have the hearing here today. With that, now